Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
To Big Blend Radio's author show. Today, we're excited to welcome back Cliff Garstang. Cliff was on our show. He's an award-winning author. He was on our show with his book, In an Uncharted Country, quite a few years ago. And he was also on our show, I think a couple years ago, with the Shaman of Turtle Valley. And he is joining us today with his latest novel. It's called Oliver's Travels. And if you know Cliff and his writing,
Cool.
you know that you get sucked in immediately at the first page and you're sucked in, you're sucked in, and we are. Oliver's Travels is amazing. Go to his website, Cliff, it's cliffordgarstang.com, right?
That's right.
Welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me back. It's we're old friends at this point, and I love that. So,
And I love
That's
that we
awesome.
finally get to see your face. I mean, we see your face in author photos, but like now we can see each other.
right. No, this is terrific.
This is cool. It happened on the way it happened, but technical difficulties lead to cool things, and we're going to be doing more of this. And that's the way life rolls. And I think what's cool about your writing is you really do talk about human experience. And Nancy, you know how artist Victoria Chick is a figurative painter, how she paints the in-between moments of things, in-between
Yeah.
moments.
Mm-hmm.
As an author, I think you do that quite a bit, where you grasp those in-between moments to highlight the moment. Does that make any sense?
Well, I think that the depiction of reality depends on seeing the details, not all of the details, because I'm not making a movie here, right? I need to show the details that give the overall impression of what's going on and what's important. Not only what I think is important, but what the characters think is important. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, you always and you give a sense of place. And by the way, I love following you on Instagram because you have those little moments. It's the observation. And I know your background, the World Bank, you've done international travel, law. The devil's in the details. Does that help
Yeah.
you as a writer?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. I think I explained this to someone a while ago. Like, writing a novel is making a case, like a legal case, and you are giving the reader, the judge, basically, enough information to decide in your favor. So you don't need to tell the judge everything, or the reader, but you do need to give enough detail, enough emotion, enough action that the reader will be compelled to agree with what you're saying. So yeah, it's very much like being a lawyer.
That's pretty cool.
The book is fun, though. I mean,
Yeah, it
I
is.
mean, I don't mean that law's not fun, because law is fun.
I think so.
Yeah, we both are like that. But Nancy's ahead in the book, and she's been spoiling it for me a little bit. And I'm like, will you stop? Please stop.
I keep saying, hey.
No, but this Oliver's Travels, I think, it is such a coming of age story, and it's honest, and I feel like, is that connected to your life?
Not really. In fact, I never thought that I would write a coming of age story, but when I conceived of who this character was, he naturally emerged from my imagination as a very young man, a recent college graduate, because I was thinking of someone who was lost, someone who, or at least hadn't yet figured out where he was going, if not quite lost. And so that naturally meant that he was a younger man. And so then it did become a coming of age story, but I don't think I was ever quite as lost as Oliver or Ollie is when he starts the journey.
I love his journey, and it's interesting too. Like for us, like I know before we started recording, we were saying, you know, I've been reading your books for like since. I mean, I
Mhm.
think you were on the first year of our podcast. I mean, way back when, even I
Yeah,
think way back when we were in 29 Palms in the high desert years ago. I mean, way we're not that old. No, but anyway, no, but I mean it's interesting because, you know, reading your books and getting to, you really do write about the human experience, but also understand the surroundings and the nature. And when we started driving through Virginia and the Appalachian area, I was like, oh, we're in Clifford's land. You know,
Mhm.
Clifford, we should have called you, but we didn't even know where. We had so many detours during COVID on our full-time travels. It's like, you're going here. No, you're not. And then you are going here. Oh, we
Oh,
are.
no, you're not.
But your area is beautiful. Virginia is amazing. The places we went were incredible, and the Appalachian region just our hearts. We also went to Indiana and Indianapolis a couple times, and that's where your book is also centered. And I thought that was pretty cool because I can see the places you're writing about them. I've always had a tactile experience with like reading your work, but it was cool to physically know where you're talking about, you know, and be part of that.
right. It was fun to write a little bit about Indianapolis. I didn't dwell on it, but and I have to say, I don't think I painted a very nice picture of it either. But
I,
uh, uh, I have another story in my last collection of stories that's set in Indiana. I haven't written a lot about Indiana, but uh, I have family there, and I grew up for some of my childhood in Indiana, including Indianapolis, and so it was fun to just stick that in there for old time's sake.
I
Mhm.
know, I know. I think
Yeah.
we were talking when we were on our way to India, and you're like, by the way, part of the book is there, and I was there. You know, it's like it's interesting all these places. But where did Ollie come from, Oliver? Like, where was the inspiration for him? Do you watch a lot of people at airports?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It's the best place. That in Vegas.
Yeah.
Well, I came to Ali sort of backwards. I was originally writing about Oliver, who is Ollie's alter ego. And I was
Mhm.
writing this series of flash fictions about Oliver, who is a guy, he's a man of the world. He travels all over the place in his work. Sometimes he's doing like high finance, and sometimes he's doing charitable work. And he's a very interesting guy. So I put him in these places. He went to Vietnam and Mongolia and Thailand and Kazakhstan, which all happen to be places where I have done work. So they were familiar to me. And I was trying to assemble this collection of flash fiction that would be a whole piece, like a novel in flash fiction. And it just wasn't feeling right to me. And at some point, I got the brilliant idea, I thought it was brilliant, of creating the writer of these flash pieces, not me, but another person who was living vicariously through this Oliver. And so I tried to imagine who it would be who was so excited about Oliver's adventures that he created them on paper. And so Ollie came into being, this young man who sees himself as a writer, but he also wants adventure. He doesn't see himself having adventures, at least not initially. And so he has invented this character, Oliver, who has the adventures that he would like to have. And so then I had to figure out who Ollie was. And the kind of person who lives through other people's adventures is, you know, maybe not the most dynamic person in the world, um, not the person who really grabs the bull by the horns and takes action, He's somebody who is, as I mentioned earlier, just not sure where he's going. And so that's where he came from. And it's very important in the book, as you know, that he was a philosophy major in
Yeah.
college, and he dwells on his philosophy studies a lot. And I was a philosophy major in college, so I do borrow a little bit of what I was interested in for him.
Well, I think the philosophy part, the major was really important too, because that's something like, especially with his dad, was like, that what a waste. You went to college, what a waste. It's like, when you think about,
That's funny.
I remember meeting someone was in Arizona, and I'll just leave this at that.
Uh-oh.
And the guy was like, I teach critical thinking. And I'm like, okay.
Alrighty then.
But it's important. I think critical thinking is, I think even with us doing podcasts, it helps. But there's the philosophy thing is that's not going to bring food on the table. It's not going to keep you in what's going on in the world of today. But I also believe we need that philosophy, right? So it was an interesting time too, because with his dad, I mean, that was not something that era really wanted to deal with or understood.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have to say my conflict with my father over my choices in college was not exactly about my major. He, when I went to college, he hoped I would be a lawyer, and when I started, I wasn't really interested in that. But a philosophy major, I chose that because I thought it was a great preparation for writing literary fiction. And it also, I was able to convince him that it's also great preparation for being a lawyer. So, and I was right about that too. So, so that's how I got away with it. But Ollie's father doesn't buy it.
Yeah, because he didn't know what he wanted to be. You knew law, you knew, I want to write. All he doesn't know, right? But then he falls for this girl. And I thought was interesting in the meeting part of this girl, Mary, that he meets, that what he thought he could romance her with, or where he knew like his philosophy, his mind was, she's like, no, that book sucked, or that story, no. I was cracking up, like, no.
Yeah, it's
I don't know if she
funny.
had that accent, but I'm using it.
I think it kind of reminds me of this algebra 4 teacher that, I mean, algebra is so like whatever, but algebra 4 got into weird realms, at least with this teacher. And he was like, you are X the unknown. And so he told us to write a mathematical equation that equaled us, where we are the unknown, now fill in the blanks. And the whole class, I was looking around like, this is funny, because we're all like, what? Everybody just stared at him. And he goes, come on, people. We're like, what? He goes, you are the unknown. And then this one guy at the back of class goes, no, we're known. We all have names. And so the teacher says, no, you're not thinking. He goes, I am thinking. And he said, well, you're not really thinking, you're reacting. And this whole thing, and I'm like, I thought we were in algebra class, and suddenly we were in philosophy class. So he made us write a mathematical equation with words. It was the weirdest exercise, but it was actually kind of cool because you brought in your background, where you were from, who you knew, and who developed you as a person. Like who made a dent. People make dents on your outside, makes you think, changes your path of life somehow. He used to say the wind buffeted you here and there. He was a weird teacher, I have to say.
Oh, I think he sounds pretty darn cool.
I know, but not for a math teacher. The math teacher. And so you came out of algebra when you had to do the final. He just put X the unknown, you are X the unknown, who are you? And that was our final. And I was like, so much easier than doing algebra 4.
Yeah, it doesn't quite sound like the math that I remember, but I love the idea. And I have to say that I really enjoyed writing the scenes where Ollie is in those philosophy classes with his classmates who are totally confused by Professor
Yeah.
Russell's questions, because he doesn't ask that question, but he asks some pretty hard questions
Yeah.
that make those kids think. And I had a great time creating Professor Russell, just because I think he was the kind of teacher I wish I had. He's a cool guy. I really like him.
I think we should back up for the audience a little bit because we're all kind of connected. This is the dangerous thing. You get into people's books, and I tried not to finish them, and it's very dangerous with yours because like I just will stay up all night. So let's back up for the audience, and you give the overview of the book because it is a coming of age story, and I think that's what's so beautiful. It's like this fresh, there's an innocence to it.
Well, you're absolutely right. We do need to explain a little bit about what's going on here. But so Ollie Tucker graduates from a small college in Indiana. He's a philosophy major. He goes home to live with his father in Indianapolis. His parents are divorced. And right away, he realizes he can't stay there. There are too many conflicts with his father. His older brother is also living at the house, and his older brother is an Army veteran, has served in Afghanistan, and there are too many problems living in that house. So Ollie picks up and moves to Winchester, Virginia, to live with his mother, and she moved there for a job when she left her husband. And so now he's in Virginia. He's never been in Virginia before, and he is trying to figure out what to do with his life. He stumbles upon the idea of being a teacher just as a way to support himself, but he also realizes that he wants to write. And he, in the course of working on his writing and becoming a teacher, he meets Mary, the woman who becomes his girlfriend, and he also recalls lessons that he learned from this Professor Russell in his philosophy classes. The most important of which is that Russell believes that travel is the key to unlocking the door of consciousness. And so Ollie buys into that, especially when, as a writer, he picks up a mentor. He meets a fiction writer who lives in Virginia and convinces the fiction writer to help him. And basically, the fiction writer says the same thing. He begins to look at Ollie's writings and says, you haven't really experienced this yourself. And to make it come alive, you need to live. You need to have these experiences. So go off, and he says, join the Peace Corps or volunteer to dig wells in Nicaragua or whatever. And so that's really what gets Ollie thinking about travel. But the real impetus behind his adventure that he starts is that he has a repressed memory. Something happened when he was a child that has really conflicted him in many ways. And he is trying to figure out what that is because his memory is very indistinct. And he learns that he is reminded that he has an uncle who disappeared a long time ago. And he thinks that he recalls that there is something to do with the uncle that is what is bothering him. And so he decides he's going to find the uncle. And so he's combining this mystery. He needs to find the uncle to solve this problem with the advice that he's received to travel in order to understand himself and become himself. And so that's what happens. He also manipulates Mary, his girlfriend, into coming with him, even though she really doesn't want to go. And so they start off on this adventure together.
It's awesome. What a cool story too, because it's
cool.
I think, when you look at the travel thing, there's that romance of, road trip, right? Which is a little different than
Mhm.
what he's doing, but there's a romance to it. There's an innocence, there's a romance, and then there's like, okay, now we're going to get dirty.
Well, it's a test. You're testing yourself when you travel, always.
Well, speaking of the test, I mean, that's exactly right. This
Mhm.
is modeled on the standard hero's journey story.
Mhm.
And that's really what the hero's journey is about. The quest is a test for the
Mhm.
hero. And he has all kinds of obstacles that he has to overcome. The typical hero also has these mentors who are behind the scenes, who are helping him. And that's why I created both Professor Russell and then this fiction writer, Bruce Owens, who advise him, not necessarily helping him, but helping him understand what he needs to do anyway.
Yeah. It's interesting too, when you think about the shaman book, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Let's go.
It kind of has a connection there in a way for me. I think even the front cover, in a way, you have that connection where there's a mystical quality between, and I only really get it now also, having traveled out that way, the Appalachian Way, the Blue Ridge Mountains, that also goes to the Far East, and it just, I don't know, reminds us that we're all connected.
Right. Well, and of course there are the Far Eastern connections in the books. Also, The Shaman of Turtle Valley includes scenes that are set in South Korea, where the hero of that book, the main character, meets his wife, who is Korean.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, the first stop on Ollie and Mary's journey is Singapore, where they
Mhm.
find jobs teaching in the American school there. And everybody seems to ask me, why Singapore? Why did you pick Singapore? And it's
Hmm.
like, really? I lived there for 10 years. Why wouldn't I pick
Yeah,
Singapore?
why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Also, it's on the opposite side of the planet. And I wanted to make the point that Ollie is turning his life upside down by doing this and really taking a huge leap. So Singapore made a lot of sense, besides the fact that I know it very well.
And it's all connected. It just
Yeah.
shows that people are connected. I think the more you travel and you experience these different experiences, right? The more you know we're all connected.
Right.
And it's almost like this challenge of finding, where are we not? You know?
Well, I mean, that raises a really important point too, because Oliver's Travels, obviously the title, is an allusion to Gulliver's Travels.
Mhm.
And that's one of the points that Jonathan Swift was making in that book, how many ever hundreds of years ago that was. And he, Lemuel Gulliver travels to 4 different foreign lands, and he discovers these other societies where he makes connections and discovers things about himself and those people. And so in Oliver's Travels, Ollie is doing something very similar. He doesn't get tied to the ground by the Lilliputians or anything, but like Gulliver did, but he does have these experiences that teach him a lot.
Mm.
It's interesting. I mean, we went halfway around the world when we went to live in Kenya. That was exactly halfway around the world. And everything was totally different. And the different tribes and peoples had their own beliefs. I think there's 49 tribes in Kenya, and each tribe had its own, I don't want to use the word religion, but they had their own set of beliefs. And they were totally different. Like you could live like across the river from a tribe, and that tribe and the tribe you were with really didn't agree on anything. So it wasn't like all the like tribes were settled next to each other. They weren't. It was just a big hodgepodge of And I always wondered, where did you guys get all your different beliefs? How come you don't believe the same thing or even close? They just all, it was like, wow, this is like a big puzzle. Nobody really thinks the same, and yet they're all in the same continent, the same country, the same continent. And then you look at Africa as a whole, and you're like, wow, this is not like our country, not like our continent, where we sort of have similar beliefs. It was just off the map, dude.
Well, I mean, that's really fascinating, and this is one of the things you discover when you travel, right? I mean, that's what you all do. That's what I have done my whole life since college. Also, it's also one of the points that I was making in the previous novel, Shaman of Turtle Valley, which, you know, this guy from Virginia marries a Korean woman. They're from very different backgrounds, and they have to find common ground in something. And he has to convince people who are prejudiced against anything different that she's really just the same, right? Okay, she's a Buddhist, not a Christian, but so what? She still has moral values and worships in her own way, and people need to get over themselves.
Well, yeah, and I think
it's true.
The Shaman of Turtle Valley is really timely right now. You know, when you think about what's happening to our friends from East Asia right now, the world is, you know, let's just put it this way. This country is really just going through a rash of racism that's been buried and happening, but now it's really up front.
Right.
And I think it's important with your writing, what you're doing is to, yes, show the differences, but the differences do create this collective that we are connected. I mean, we're related to trees, you know, we do share the same DNA as trees.
Right.
It's tiny percentage. So like, come on, you know, when you look at people, we got to get over it. But that's the beauty of your books, is showing the human collective, human experience, where we can identify with each other, no matter what color or where we're from. That's the beauty of your writing.
Well, thank you. That is important to me, and it's maybe I'm even hitting it more directly in the book I'm working on now. So in a couple of years we can talk about this again.
Okay.
In Virginia.
Anyway.
Or somewhere else. We won't do computer screens or phones or any of that anymore. Let's just do it in person.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So I can't really talk too much about it because it's really inchoate so far, but this is about a couple who travel abroad, and they are thrust into a situation that they're not familiar with. And actually it's a blended historical and contemporary story. So the same thing happens twice, basically 100 years apart. And one of the lessons they have to learn is that, okay, they're Americans, but these other people are not that different, that they have suffered in ways that this particular couple has not, and we all have to understand that.
Amazing. So what is your day like as a writer?
Well, I try to treat my writing as a job. It is a job. And so I come to my desk where I'm sitting right now.
Woohoo!
At about 8 o'clock in the morning, or earlier if I have managed to get out of bed earlier, and I get to it. I usually make the mistake of checking email first, which is always a mistake, but I do it anyway because I have to. But
you're good at answering your emails.
I'm too good at answering my emails. Yes. I blame my legal career for that, because I was always having to be very responsive to clients, right? Both when I was in private practice and then when I was in-house at the World Bank. I wanted to get back to everybody right away, and they loved it. Nowadays, it doesn't matter so much for me. But anyway, so I'm writing from about 8 o'clock until maybe noon. Today I was pretty disciplined. I was finishing a short story, and I did finish it this morning. So that was good. And then in the afternoon, I typically do other writing related things like get on Zoom calls for interviews, or send out emails for book promotion, lining up appearances, that sort of thing.
Because you have to do the business side of it. It's not,
Yeah.
it's like you do the hard work of a book, and then but for you now, isn't it like you really look at all of your books now? It's not like this is the first one. I mean, you think about how much you've written.
Right. Yeah. So I am lining up some appearances that will deal not just with the new book, but I get to talk about all of them.
Awesome.
They're all still in print, so that's
cool.
handy.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's changed too. And I think back to when you first came on the show, like how Kindle is, the ebooks, audiobooks. Are your books on audiobooks now?
They're not yet on audio. I think that this one, Oliver's Travels, will be. This is a different publisher than I've worked with before, and it's Regal House Publishing is the name of it, and they are keen to exploit various kinds of technologies. So I think that it will be at some point.
That's awesome.
But yeah, all the books are on Kindle also, and other ebook formats. So yeah.
That's awesome. So you just keep writing along. Go ahead, Nancy. Sorry.
I was going to say, I have to ask this. Who would you pick as an actor to play Oliver?
Oh, that's really hard. At one point, so one of the things that I do when I'm starting a book is I used to go through magazines and pull out pictures of models or actors.
Oh yeah, cool.
To be the characters. And it's been a very long time since I had these pictures for this book. But I don't know, Ryan Reynolds maybe would be.
Yeah, he would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good age group too.
I mean, he's a little older than Ollie is now, but he can look younger if necessary.
We can wash him off.
Makeup. They got makeup.
But I've been working on this new book for so long. Those are the characters that I'm thinking of these days. So
yeah, that's going to be hard. You're in the creative place, right? I mean,
So
how is it to not live with these characters in your mind as you do things like you go out to brunch with friends and not, well, I know we're only now able to do all that, but like, how do you like kind of put them in the back and not think that they're sitting there at the table with you? It's a weird question, but like, doesn't that kind of happen?
How do you put them to bed? Like, okay, I finished the last page of the book and bye-bye.
Good night, Ollie.
On to the next.
I got new characters going on.
Well, every time I do this, somebody will ask me, what about the sequel? Because the way I typically end things in a book is I don't wrap things up neatly. I like to leave some questions unanswered, and that's partly because I think it's intriguing. Maybe it's unsatisfactory for some readers, but anyway, I like some questions left. And when I was doing a lot of short stories, what I would end up doing, leaving a question unanswered, I'm like, well, okay, now I have to write another story to answer that question, and then I'll leave another question unanswered. And so in The Shaman of Turtle Valley, I do leave some pretty big things hanging there at the end, and everybody wants to know what happened to these characters. So that's nice to know. I don't know if I'll visit those characters or not, but it's nice to know that people do care. But with Ollie, I think Ollie is in a pretty good place at the end of this book. I don't want to give anything away, but he knows who he is now, and so I think I'm done. I'm done with Ollie.
But now the ones that you're writing about,
Bye-bye,
do
Ollie.
they go to your brunch with your friends?
Well, I do think about them all the time. And I mean, since I'm not done with the book, I don't know what happens to them. Well, that's not really true. I do know what happens.
Don't spill it, but you know what I mean. But doesn't it kind of just live in your head as you're doing things like, you know, the creative process? And I think it's interesting too what you say about leaving the openness, because that's you if everything is spelled out for the reader, it's boring. We
Right.
want to be part of the
Mhm.
creative process. We always talk about co-creation, and reading good books have
Mhm.
that door where you are visualizing the character, hearing their voices,
Mhm.
creating that. And so you're on that journey. And I think that's the beauty of books. You are part of the process. Whereas in a movie, nothing against movies. We love movies. It's all right there.
Right.
You're now, it's all
Mm.
done for you. Whereas in the books, you're part of that.
Well, this is also, another difference is that it's to my mind harder to place the reader in a book in a setting that is convincing and appealing, whereas in a movie you take a picture of it, right, and you're
There it
done.
is.
And I've talked,
Mm.
given some thought to doing adaptations of books and stories and writing the screenplay for them, but writing a screenplay is really difficult for me because you don't have all of this description. The stuff that you're going to take a picture of, you don't describe in the screenplay. You just have dialogue and action. And yeah, I have dialogue and action in a novel too, or a short story, but I really love describing the place or
Mhm.
having the characters describe the place. So when Ali first arrives in Singapore, when he's looking for his uncle, um, it's a new experience for him. And so the reader sees Singapore through his eyes.
Mm.
And that's one of the fun things for me as a writer.
But I think that's what's so beautiful is having that
Mhm.
sense of place to me. And I think that's, that's why even with your Instagram, you have that attention to detail of things, but you don't go, and now here's the 20 things about that detail. You know what I mean? To
Right.
have that ability and transfer it over is so crucial. Sense of place is everything. And you want to smell it, you want to see the little details, and when you're reading, you want to see that. That's what I think is that craft of writing is don't give them the medicine, but here it is. I don't know. It's magic when it's right like that, that sense of place is whether it's the living, like, Ollie's mom, of what she was like having gardens. And then even if she didn't have a garden anymore, that her house was that way. Like she had this sense of taste in how she was in style. It's the same thing as nature, you know, I, that's the key. Those little things add up to so much, and you don't have to dwell on it. It's there,
And the way your place changes, in theory, tells you a lot about what's changing in the
life.
person. So just the mother, for example,
Mhm.
she was meticulous in caring for the house, but because of the changes that have taken place in her life, she's less attuned to the garden, for example, and
Mhm.
taking care of the yard than she used to be. So
Yeah, no, awesome. I'm so glad. This is so exciting. No, just keep going. We want more. We want more. Can we make you into a factory? No.
I'm putting my virtual background back up
There it
because
is.
I just want
Yes.
to show the cover of the book.
And
Awesome.
see, I love it. That is the Blue Ridge Mountains, right? And that's the beauty. But isn't Asia have that kind of quality, that sense too?
Well, so the even though my experience is all Asia, he doesn't stay in Asia. So he goes on from Singapore and visits some other beautiful places. So this backdrop actually works for a couple of different visits that he makes in the book.
Cool.
So there, everyone. Well,
Mhm.
everyone, so it's cliffordgarstang.com or is it cliffgarstang.com?
Cliffordgarstang.com.
I didn't want to have to look at my notes and turn away. We're used to being audio. Now we have to do this. It's all good though. It's nice. It's so nice to see you in person.
Yeah.
Everyone, Oliver's Travels, a novel out by Clifford Garstang. You can see it. .com. Go to his website, Amazon. Go to your independent bookstores. Are you in independent bookstores in your region in the southeast?
Yeah.
Southeast? Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Awesome.
many of them are selling through bookshop.org, which is a great way to support independent bookstores. You can order online. It's just as easy as buying from Amazon, but you are supporting independent bookstores. So that's bookshop.org, and all of my books are available through there.
Ooh, we should do an
Awesome.
interview with
I
them,
like
Nancy.
that.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
the
like
more we
that.
can do for the independence, the better, for sure.
Mhm.
Well, thank you
For
so much
sure.
for joining us. And you know what? When we get up into the Virginia area, we're going to put the Hong Kong. We'll call you and let you know. And maybe we can go have a walk in the woods or have some fun. It'll be great
That
to
would
meet
be
you in
great.
person.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much for having me back on the show, and it's wonderful to see your faces this time.
Yeah.
So this is great.
We just don't have our champagne. This is wrong. That's what we'll do. We'll have to go on a champagne walk.
That's
It.
right.
That's it.
That sounds
Champagne.
great.
Thank you so much, Cliff.
Thank you.
Take care.